Snazzy, I'm officially worried about today's video.
Yeah? Why's that?
Well, the movie I'm talking about relates directly to the pandemic and lockdowns from 2020, and I'm wondering if I won't be able to monetize because of that.
Still touchy about it, are they?
Yeah, and I really can't dance around it either. Do you think I should even bother? I mean, even if I can monetize it, it might not get promoted by the algorithm because of the subject matter.
Well, maybe. But then again, when has that stopped you before?
Good point. I guess I just have to rely on my audience to help spread the word about this. Well, once more into the breach. Something I've noticed over the last few years is that the entertainment industry just seems to like pretending that the year 2020 didn't happen. I could speculate as to the reasons why, although some of those reasons wouldn't be completely flattering to certain parties, but instead I'd rather focus on one of the few movies that does acknowledge humanity's lost year. It's an independent kaiju movie from Japan entitled Yuzo, the Biggest Battle in Tokyo.
Meet Yuzo Oki. He's a salaryman who's quite fond of his position, especially since he can offload a lot of his work onto his underlings so he can slack off and spend time with his girlfriend. When the pandemic comes to Japan and everything shuts down, it doesn't bother him at first since he can telecommute, but then he gets fired. Desperate to find work, he accepts a job at the Galaxy Company without really knowing what he's in for. As it turns out, the company basically steals garbage for resale, and the employees are the oddest oddballs in all of Japan. Yuzo must struggle to adapt if he's to stay afloat. Oh, and a monster shows up towards the end.
Gee, that last part feels really tacked on.
Yes, Snazzy. Yes, it is.
Look, I only had a general idea of what to expect when I sat down to watch Yuzo for the first time. I knew it was likely to be a comedy based on the plot description and imagery, but I wasn't expecting it to be such a weird comedy.
Now, I want to make something very clear. When I say Yuzo is a weird movie, I do not mean it in the, oh, Japan is so bizarre and exotic to my Western sensibilities kind of way. I have seen enough in the way of anime comedy to know what Japanese humor is like. And even by that standard, Yuzo is a weird movie.
Take the cast of characters, for example. Every employee of the Galaxy Company is a certified nutcase, from the fitness instructor who thinks he's inherited the soul of Bruce Lee, to the guy who wears a dog costume and communicates through sign language, by which I mean he writes on a sign.
There's variety in the cast, I'll give it that, but there's really no rhyme or reason to it.
The characters just feel like an assortment of the most random archetypes the filmmakers could think of thrown together in one space. Hey, what if one of the employees wears a dog costume for no discernible reason? What if the trash collector aspires to be a pop idol who does a silly dance? What if the telemarketer is in debt to the Yakuza and losing his fudge the whole time? What if the repairman in the basement seems normal at first but he's secretly plotting an act of domestic terrorism?
The assortment is entirely random, and that's exacerbated by the fact that none of these characters interact with anyone in any meaningful way other than Yuzo.
You see, once he's employed there, Yuzo is sent to every single department because, well, basically it's so we can meet the whole cast because otherwise we wouldn't. The tour does show us how the company works, I suppose. It basically collects discarded appliances and medical masks and fixes them up to be resold to the public.
Technically, all but one of the employees plays a role in that process. Or at least they theoretically do. Given what we're shown, I have a hard time believing Galaxy Company would make any sort of profit.
Why would they keep a guy in debt to the Yakuza on their payroll? Why would they let one of their employees be a furry at the office? How could they be so lax that they don't know one of their own is building a bomb in the basement? And why do they keep the fitness guy on? Yeah, remember how I said all but one of the employees has a clear role in the company? This Bruce Lee enthusiast is the odd man out. His job is to do live stream workouts for lazy people, which has nothing to do with the rest of the company. In fact, we see his department objectively failing when he loses his last subscriber, so again, why keep him around?
Sorry, I got a little sidetracked from my original point, which is that none of the employees have meaningful interactions with each other until the climax. They all interact with Yuzo as he gets cycled around the different departments, but as co-workers, they may as well be on different planets.
The only one who has any insights into the company dynamic is the repairman, who calls his co-workers good but eccentric people. That's nice and all, but it doesn't add any real depth to them. We really don't know anything about them beyond the most basic stuff, like what their jobs are and what makes them oh so quirky. The only character who gets a backstory is the furry, but he immediately reveals that it's all made up, so nuts to that. Once they come together at the end to fight the kaiju, who I'll be getting to later, it feels less like they're a band of brothers united in trying times, and more like they have to work together because that's what characters in a story are supposed to do.
Oh, but it gets even stranger beyond the workplace.
On 2 separate occasions, Yuzo goes to a musical bar. Not a karaoke bar, a musical bar, in which every visit is a song and dance number.
I really didn't expect this, and I wish I could say it was a good addition.
To give credit where credit is due, these numbers are better than the Trash Collector's Wriggle dance, and it's impressive that they pulled the first one off entirely in one continuous shot. My issue with them, however, is that they feel like padding.
You see, if these scenes were not musical numbers, they would be very short, but as musical numbers, they can be extended, and in doing so, you can extend the movie's runtime as well.
As a result, I'm not entirely sure they needed to be here. And that's not even the only example of padding. The furry's fictional backstory is also there just to extend the runtime, and it feels like other scenes stretch on the way they do for a similar purpose.
Then you have stuff that's just completely out of left field.
For example, Yuzo's girlfriend learns very late that he was fired from his first job and he didn't tell her. This secrecy, combined with what a downgrade his new job is, leads to her breaking up with him on the spot, proclaiming she'll never speak to him again. Then we suddenly get this fantasy sequence of her in a skimpy outfit against a starry backdrop, and she goes from smiling to being possessed by the devil.
Now, to be clear, I understand what the impressionistic stuff is saying, and I can appreciate the sight of an attractive Japanese woman in a revealing outfit, but it's completely unnecessary.
We already got what this imagined spot relays about her attitude not even 5 seconds prior. We don't need a random dream sequence to emphasize the point.
It also doesn't make sense in context. Yuzo does not have visions like this anywhere else in the movie, so it just sort of happens out of nowhere. Sheesh, I'm this far in and I haven't even mentioned the kaiju yet. You know, at this point it's clear the human side of the plot hasn't impressed me. But the general rule of thumb is that when the humans fail to deliver, the monsters should be able to pick up the slack. In this case, our monster is called Virus King. So can he save the movie?
Well, I'll say this up front. Virus King's design is really cool. The SRS DVD cover doesn't do him justice. Details like the jutting horn, the strange red eyes, and the jagged yellow markings against his dark purple hide all make for a visually striking monster.
Yeah, but looks aren't everything, are they, Omni?
Rarely if ever, Snazzy, and it saddens me that the only thing I can compliment Virus King on are his looks.
First of all, Virus King doesn't actually show up until the final act of the movie, and he isn't really built up all that much beforehand. We only get 2 kinds of foreshadowing. First is that a UFO lands somewhere outside of Tokyo for reasons never specified, and Galaxy Company's eccentric chairman is trying to catch the alien pilot. Second is that the company's secretary apparently has psychic visions of the beast because apparently she develops clairvoyance after reading a book the boss gives her.
The visions always feel randomly inserted, but I guess they are kinda necessary because without them you might very well forget a kaiju was even meant to show up.
Once Virus King does make the scene, he proceeds to mostly just walk forward in a straight line. Oh, not again!
For crying out loud, why is this the one thing from Shin Godzilla that everybody imitates?
To be fair, Virus King does a little more than just ambling. He also sucks the masks off people's faces and occasionally picks them up with a tentacle so he can eat them. Why? Search me. He doesn't really seem to have a goal or anything. He just strolls through the city because that's what kaiju do.
Maybe it's got something to do with the pandemic. I mean, Virus King is supposed to be allegorical for the real virus, right?
You would think so, but it turns out his name is non-indicative. I mean it. There is nothing that connects Virus King to the pandemic.
The closest thing we have to a link is that the club at the end of his tail kinda sorta possibly vaguely resembles the popular image of the virus microbe if you squint at it sideways. But that's about it, and he doesn't even use it for anything.
He also doesn't appear to be spreading illness during his rampage.
He eats people's masks, but that doesn't seem to do anything beyond leaving them maskless, which isn't even treated as an inconvenience by anyone. He's also apparently so distractible that he stops dead in his tracks twice in a row for the same stupid dance.
Oh, look at that. More needless padding.
Oh, and when he gets blown up with a bomb at the end, it apparently opens a portal to another universe that the characters need to escape from before it collapses. Yeah, that's something that happens at the end without explanation, but then again, it's probably my fault for expecting one at this point.
Heck, even his origin has nothing to do with the pandemic whatsoever.
Virus King exists because the telemarketer loses his temper when asking for more money, accidentally hits the little alien with a bat, and suddenly they fuse into a monster. I don't know exactly what that's allegorical of, but it's not the pandemic. All the events leading up to the monster's appearance could have played out in any context and nothing would change.
In short, Virus King has nothing to do with the event that supposedly inspired this movie. If you're expecting him to be to the pandemic what the 1954 Godzilla was to nuclear testing, leave that expectation at the door. He does not deliver. You know, come to think of it, the entire movie barely has anything to do with the events of 2020. I'm dead serious.
The only way the setting has any effect on the plot is that Yuzo is telecommuting from his apartment when he gets fired from his first job. That really is the extent of it. From there, the pandemic and the lockdowns don't matter.
I already spoke about how that lack of connection applies to Virus King, but it also applies to the world in general.
The virus is mentioned very infrequently, and sometimes as a thing of the past rather than the present. Characters wear masks infrequently, nobody washes their hands or carries sanitizer, and there's no social distancing at all. In fact, nobody seems overly concerned about getting sick, nor does anybody get sick. There's not even so much as a sore throat or a loss of taste to be seen anywhere.
Remember, this movie is set during the lockdowns, so this kind of omission is glaring. It's like if somebody made a movie about the Untouchables, where at the very beginning Elliot Ness mentions prohibition, but then for the rest of the runtime we never see him and his crew breaking into speakeasies or busting rum runners. That's the level of omission we're at.
Truth be told, I can't think of a single reason why this movie had to be set during the pandemic, which is a big deal because that detail is supposed to be a major selling point. This is the pandemic kaiju movie, and it has virtually nothing to do with the pandemic.
As such, what was the point of bringing up the pandemic in the first place? Was it just for the publicity? I sure hope not, because that would be a pretty bad look.
What about the very end? Could that somehow tie into the pandemic?
Oh, you must mean that weak attempt to impart a moral at the end.
Basically, once Virus King is split back into the individuals that comprise it, the alien decides to go home. As Yuzo and the chairman see it off, they comment on how nobody ultimately meant any harm, so the whole situation is one they just have to apply the forgive and forget philosophy to.
I suppose that if you really stretch it, you could say this is the movie's commentary on 2020 as a whole.
It's saying that times were hard and not everything was pleasant, but it's over and nobody was really at fault for it.
Yeah, there are many reasons why that is a terrible message to impart in terms of the pandemic specifically, but then again, the movie barely has anything to do with the pandemic, as mentioned.
Ergo, the message is just vague and wishy-washy, so the movie can give it to me and I'll give it right back for all that it's worth.
In the end, I just don't see what all the fuss was about.
Yeah, I know, this was a little independent movie and a lot of hard work went into it, but that's what makes it extra disappointing. So much effort was put in, and this was the result.
As far as I'm concerned, the only thing worth socially distancing from is this movie. It has nothing of value to say and it doesn't function as escapism, so it's better off just sheltering in place. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewers signing off. Uh-oh. Okay, looks like the test results just came in. Let's see what they have to say. Good news, we're naming a disease after you. Well, I always did want to make history somehow.